Hello and welcome to the Help Is Here podcast brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. Yes, there is a bit of a change in name. We have had the Finally Quit Porn podcast for a while, but it's not really suiting what we're doing any longer. I started the Finally Quit Porn podcast quite a long time ago, and I started that because I was struggling with porn. I wanted to share my journey. I wanted to provide tips, help, advice. Tried my best to do that. Continued to have relapses, shared those on the podcast. And now I've come to understand the method that I believe really does work. It's working for me, it's working for our clients. And so I've gone for a change of name because the problem with porn is really a problem with the thoughts that we have. It's about our process, our system, and more specifically, having a tool to deal with those addictive neural pathways. It's not so much about pornography. And so going forward, I want to still talk about porn addiction, but I really want to talk about changing thought patterns. And this education I've had through Mary Paulus has been absolutely life-changing. So I'm really, really excited to start to do a lot more podcasts here on the Help Is Here podcast. The other thing I would say is a lot of my old content was actually incorrect when I look back and, well, listen back to it. I spent all week basically listening back to my old videos and podcasts, and I just disagree with so much of it. And so I'm really, really sorry to anyone who's maybe been really enjoying those podcasts and listening to a lot of them, or has maybe even used some of that advice, because I just don't think it's very, very helpful now. And going forward, I'm going to just stick with this one method, which is the Beyond Compulsion method, which Mary has taught me. And I'm actually going to delete all those previous episodes up until meeting Mary, essentially, because I don't buy into them any longer. And they did work for a while. They got me some success. And I thought at the time that obviously they were working and that it was useful stuff. And doing those no-fap streaks, I had a lot of success on no-fap. It's just my standards and my perspective on addiction has transformed entirely. And I no longer believe that doing a streak of maybe 90 days is a good goal. Instead, changing addictive neural pathways entirely and gaining permanent mental freedom and being in control of yourself at all moments is the real goal. And that's what we're now teaching. So, Mary, I've rambled on. Over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself a bit for anyone who's maybe not come across any of your work before?
Yeah, well, I'm Mary, created Beyond Compulsion many, many, many years ago, and working with all the addictions. So it's really exciting to be switching over, and we're obviously going to be helping guys quit the porn too. But, with all the substitution and distraction techniques out there, so many people with addictions end up with other addictions. And many of the guys we've been working with porn have already established other addictions or compulsions because they've been trying to just do something else or distract themselves from their porn addiction. So it's really, really super exciting to be able to open it up to all addictions and yet still help all the guys struggling with porn, or women too. I guess there are women too. We don't have women in our program yet, but we're open if there are women struggling with porn. So yeah, and they're finding so much success, and we get such positive feedback from the clients. And so yeah, we want to make it available to everyone because there's so much addiction. And I've been doing this for 35 years, and this method has proved true, tried and true, I think is the saying, just like over all these years. So it's super exciting. So do we
Mm.
want to talk to the folks about how we met?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, sure. Another reason that we're actually shifting over the name as
Yeah.
well is because so many people have been in touch with me at one time or another saying that they really don't like having to see like Finally Quit Porn either on their
Yeah.
phone, on like their dashboard in their car, and on
Yeah.
iPads, and like trying to hide that away from their kids. And that's like super, super common. So hopefully now calling it Help Is Here will be a bit of a relief for any parents out there or people with partners who not at the point yet where they've told them that they are trying to quit porn. So I really hope this name change is useful to you. And we're going to have way more podcasts coming soon as well, which I'm really excited for. In terms of how we met, yeah,
Yeah.
weird one, right? Because it was a complete sort of complete luck in my opinion. Just that you found me at the right
Yeah.
time and everything. I mean, from my perspective, what happened is this random scammy website company have got in touch with me called podcastguest.com. I really didn't believe that they were like real, or that, it'd end up with anything legitimate. They get in touch, they say, we've got all these people who want to go on podcasts. Can we use your podcast in our newsletter? So I was like, yeah, why not? And then I just expected their reply to be, okay, we will do it. You'll get all this like publicity. That will be £200, please. But I never got that reply. Instead, they said, okay, well, we're going to put it in our newsletter. And next week, they send me a spreadsheet with about 50 different names, all these amazing people from all over the world wanting to come on the podcast. And you were obviously one of them. I narrowed it down and filtered out probably most people on there. There's only a handful of people who I thought, yeah, they've got the right expertise to come on the podcast. You were one, and you come on. You'd actually listened to one of my previous podcasts, heard me have the relapse, and you're like, Tom, you're still in this addiction. Back then, I didn't know, and that's the thing, right?
Like,
I
heads
honestly
up,
thought,
you're still in the addiction.
yeah, like, mate, what are you doing wanting to finally quit porn podcast when you're still looking at porn? And back
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
because I was in that addiction so deep, I just didn't know that I was in
yeah.
it, because I minimized it so much in my mind. Like, oh, this is okay now. I'm only engaging once every month. Maybe it's once every 3 months. So it's fine. I've dealt with the shame. I've done this internal healing work. I meditate a lot. So, I've got this problem under control, because it's so infrequent that it's not a problem anymore. Completely denying the reality of addiction. So you obviously gave me coaching, but yeah, over to you, Mary. Do you want to sort of explain from your side kind of the journey of me and you working together
Yeah.
a bit more?
Well, I get emails from the company, right? That's like people looking for podcast guests, and I would just always go through and think, there was so much on there. Oh God, so much on like people dieting and fitness, because I've worked with food compulsion for many, many years, and just all these different people looking for guests, but a lot of them I thought, I'm not going to be able to break through all this dogma about how to deal with food stuff. And I was getting a little bit frustrated with it. And then I'm like, oh, well, wait, who's this guy looking for a guest? He's talking about porn addiction. Okay, well, that's not something that I've dealt with much. I've had people that were sort of, they call it more like love and sex addiction or whatever. But specifically porn, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to apply to this guy. And, it took you a while to get back to me. It
Mm.
was quite some time. And then I'm like, oh, out of the blue, there you were. And then you were late to the podcast. Remember, we
Yeah.
scheduled and you were late. You were late. And I'm like, oh, well, while I'm waiting for him, I'm going to listen to his last couple of podcasts.
Right.
So I'm listening, and then I'm like, he's still in this addiction. Wait a second here. What's happening? It's so cool. We can laugh about it now, right?
Yeah.
So then I messaged you and I said, hey, when we get on the podcast today, would you like to talk about the fact that you're actually relapsing? And you said yes, which I was kind of surprised. And then I listened back to it. We didn't talk very specifically about that. It was kind of more about me and what I do. But then and then afterwards we talked, and I said, hey, how would you like to learn this method?
Mm.
And we did. I taught you the whole class, and here we are today. It really was some kind of coincidence that we met. We're in totally different time zones, totally different countries. I mean, but it's
Yeah.
just so awesome. I'm so excited about continuing to do this work and open it up to so many more addictions, because man, I'll tell you, it's epidemic over here, and
Oh,
like in a
yeah.
crazy way. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's pretty bad over there too, but
Yeah, that's
addiction is
crazy.
just it's so mistreated, so misunderstood, and all these methodologies that basically are making addiction worse, and nobody seems to want to go, hey, wait, we're throwing the same solution at the problem and it's getting worse. Maybe we need to take a look at what the treatment, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
and here we
I
are
can't
today.
I can't
Yeah.
believe that. Yeah, I can't believe I was late. I can't remember that at all. Honestly, I
I
think,
know that's not like you at all. You're never late. You're always
yeah.
just like right on. Maybe you had to go use some porn.
In all seriousness, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, like kind of overcoming compulsion does just sort of change everything. Like my standards for myself now in every area of my life are just so much higher than they were in the past. And yeah, I'm very rarely late when me and you chat, and never late really with clients.
Never,
But
never.
in the past, yeah, I would be late for stuff very often. I totally forgot I was late for that. Yeah, I can't even remember meeting you really the first time. But I know
Yeah.
when I was in that addiction, I I would forget things all the time. And that was actually one of the big sort of consequences for me. I like things would just go out of my mind entirely and I just forget about them. And I suppose that's because you are concentrating in one way or another on the porn so often, whether it's
Yeah.
I want to look at porn or whether it's I'm going to try and avoid porn. And I think,
Yeah, it's that constant conflict,
yeah,
right? Where you're always in your head going, I want to do it, I want to stop, I want to do it, I want to stop. You're totally distracted,
yeah,
from reality all the time because it's so consuming, that being stuck in an addiction. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I
Mhm.
think that's why I'm choosing to delete all of those previous episodes because I'm kind of spreading this message in those first ones. And as I say, I've literally listened back to all of them, analyzed them in quite a bit of detail to just check, is there value here or am I talking some rubbish? And most of them, to be honest, I'd say like 95% is good. Like 95% of the content's like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then it's like the 5% that's bad, which is going to lead people to still engaging. Because if you want to quit an addiction for good, you can't have loopholes, in my opinion. Like, I
Mhm.
really think if you have any loopholes, any rationalization, any excuse, any justification that you can latch onto, you are going to stay in the addiction indefinitely. When you
Yeah.
can filter all of those out and change the thought patterns, then you are going to gain permanent mental freedom. And that may sound very black and white, all or nothing, but when you understand the things that Mary's taught me, you realize actually this is a choice where it's either one or the other, and you can't be in the addiction and just continue minimizing it indefinitely. That's what I did.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I think that constant conflict of I'm wanting to engage,
Yeah.
I want to stop engaging. Where I'd got to with it all when I started the podcast was probably a place where I was very good at the wanting to stop. And so I had that, 95% of the time. And that's why the streaks were good and the use was very infrequent. But that sort of 5% of wanting that came up very rarely, maybe every few weeks or months, that would still lead me to porn. And that's where I
Yeah.
went wrong.
And to underestimate when you think you're controlling it, right? Like somehow you're getting past this addiction when you're really not. You're getting good at controlling it, but it's still looming. I remember working, there was one man I was working with food compulsion who said, I always keep my fat suit in the closet because I know it's coming back, right? Because it was like never truly getting past it. And all the things you mentioned, all the rationalizations, excuses, everything like that, learning to be able to talk back to those effectively and identify those effectively rather than just focusing on what's the next distraction technique or how am I going to not think about this. Learning very specifically to talk back to all of that stuff and identify all that stuff is key, and if you're off, going on a fitness program to try to deal with your addiction, you're not learning anything. You're not changing neural pathways of compulsive desire. And that's what needs to change in order to attain permanent mental freedom. So
Yeah,
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 yeah, for
absolutely.
sure.
And
Mhm.
in the context of doing like a fitness journey, one of the best sort of 6 weeks that I had in 2023 was when I did do a 6 week fitness transformation. So it cost around £2,000. So it was a fair investment and,
Yes.
a lot of money. I didn't really have that much money, but I really was at a point in my life where I needed some kind of transformation. And I just felt so frustrated with myself. I'd actually just relapsed. I'd spent about 2 weeks on dating apps and I was getting loads of matches at first, and then as like kind of maybe second week came about, those matches sort of dwindled up, and I stopped talking to these girls. And I look back on that in itself, and I'm like, wow, as if I was ever even on like dating apps. Like, I just would never choose to do something like that nowadays because I just see
Yeah.
them as totally compulsive and addictive, and I just wouldn't really want to do that. But anyway, so I was on these dating apps and not really having much success. I end up getting really frustrated. I end up feeling all this deprivation, as I'm sure we'll talk about more in other episodes. I end up being like, oh, I can't get a girl, I can't have sex, this is so annoying. And that's all I wanted the dating apps for as well, really, if I'm honest with myself, is I was in the porn
Yeah.
and sex addiction. So I end
Yeah.
up, masturbating and edging and looking at a load of porn and relapsing probably 3 or 4 times in the same evening. And then I got an email from this company called Ultimate Performance, and they're basically the best performance trainers in Manchester where I live, and it's a really nice gym. So I go in for this 6 week body transformation. I was weighing 11 and a half stone at the time, dropped down in 6 weeks to 10 stone. So I lose 1.5 stone. I don't know what that is in pounds. I think it's 21 pounds. So quite a lot in just six
Significant.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I get really good at football in those 6 weeks. I'm on the no fap streak and things are going really well in that area as well. So it's a really good 6 weeks. My parents started to say my face was looking very gaunt. I looked like some kind of drug addict or something like that. And
Yeah.
and then I think the next 6 weeks after completing that 6 week transformation, the next 6 weeks I go and put on 21 pounds. You know,
Food, substitute food. I'm just going to try to eat this addiction away, which is such a massive problem, no pun intended, massive problem right now, that the normalizing of food compulsion is epidemic as well. And so anyone who's trying to stop an addiction, people are, oh, you're uncomfortable, you're trying to do this thing, so just have some carbs, have some cookies, have some whatever, it's just like, it's there, people push food compulsion as if that's like some kind of a solution, when, boy, don't underestimate the consequences of food compulsion.
mm,
It is basically surpassed smoking as the #1 preventable cause of death. And not to mention the absolute 100% misery of living with obesity in the meantime, before you do have probably an early death, and all the physical problems, all the medical problems that you have, because the body is not meant to carry that excess weight and all the diabetes and everything. And people think, oh, I'm just going to eat some cookies to make myself feel better while I'm trying to not do porn. It's like, well, that is a detour to disaster in a major way. But when society's out there like, oh yeah, just do it, just have, you need to feel better. It makes it very challenging when everybody around you is making jokes about eating food to deal with emotions.
well, I
So
think the
yeah.
thing is with food addiction, and maybe we'll talk about this in future episodes, but I'm not sure if we will anytime soon. So I still think the focus will mostly be porn. But yeah, with my like 6 weeks doing the challenge, and then 6 weeks after I put the weight back on, like the main thing there is that I just hadn't actually learned anything to change those neural pathways. I'd learned
Yep.
how to pick up weights correctly. I'd had this really restricted diet, but then I just intermittently reinforce those addictive neural pathways, because then when I'm back on the food after the 6 weeks, I get completely out of control and I'm just eating like crazy because
Yeah.
I felt so deprived for 6 weeks. And that deprivation, getting out of that deprivation and then combine that with intermittent reinforcement, I mean, it's just a pathway to self-destruction, really. It's inevitable.
Yeah, I'm sure that people go back and forth with porn, food, porn, food, porn, food. But then what happens is they end up with both compulsions. And then you know what you got? You got a fat porn addict.
Yeah,
We've talked
exactly.
about that imagery,
Yeah,
so
not what you
not a
want.
great, not a great goal.
Oh,
But permanent mental freedom is a possibility. Thank God, right?
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing on food addiction, I would say, is that I know you can see the you can see the harm in people's like body weight, and you can see
Yeah.
how that has an impact on their life. But I would really say behind that, the real main problem that most people with a food addiction are going to be suffering with is that lack of peace of mind, because they're going to be wanting food all the time. And then in that constant battle of, I want this food, I want to stop eating so much food, going back and forth, again, the constant conflict, as we talked about earlier. And that in itself is just no way to live, because then what's happening is you're missing out on that opportunity to connect with other people, to focus on your goals, to achieve your goals, to live the life that you actually wish to live. Because in your mind, you're actually just spending so much time thinking about this problem. And
Yes.
you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the problem's not going away. You know, those addictive neural pathways need to be changed. You can't take a passive approach towards addiction, which is what everyone seems to be trying to do right now, especially with porn. And it just does
Yeah.
not work.
You know, I was gonna say that, and we're starting to have the same brain here, Tom. I was when I was talking about the food addiction, I was gonna say that peace of mind. There's the physical problems, the obesity, all that, but I'll tell you what, all these years working with food compulsion, yeah, people want to lose the weight because it's very problematic on so many levels. But I would say with food compulsion and with all the addictions that I've worked with, the number one thing that people want to attain is peace of mind. Peace of mind. I mean, it's just like, it's so underestimated what it is like to live in that addiction of that, in that dilemma, that conflict of wanting to do it, wanting to stop. Oh my God, how am I going to stop doing this? Oh, but I want to do it. Now I'm doing it. And oh my God, now I want to, it's really underestimated. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah,
100%.
definitely. I've had two conversations this week with different guys. One of them's a client, one of them's looking to join the program, and they both actually said very, very similar things to me in that they've been working 9 to 5 sort of jobs, you know, very successful, doing well for themselves, and now they're looking to actually consider, you know, setting up their own business. It's been a goal for both of them actually. I
Yeah.
don't know so much about either of their stories so far because I only had a talk about this with both of them for about 10, 15 minutes. But both of them have previously been addicted to porn, just like myself, and just like myself in the sense that working, you know, a 9 to 5 job or having a career and doing quite well in that career, but then looking to actually set up your own business. And what both of them were saying is, you know, once you go beyond porn, you can actually get to a position in your life where you do have the mental clarity, energy, and really the resources mentally, I suppose, to actually go and build that business and do that thing that maybe you've been putting off due to a lack of confidence for so many years. And when you're in
Yeah.
that position, you can just go all out and go for it. Like today and yesterday, as I said to you earlier, I've been off my 9 to 5 job. You know, I only do that part time anyway. I've not been working on that. I took a few days holiday and like the passion and enthusiasm, the excitement and the love for my work today and yesterday, working on the Beyond Compulsion Academy and setting up this whole new system and everything we're doing together,
Yeah.
like it's just been amazing. Like if every day was like today and yesterday for the rest of my life, that'd just be awesome. And I feel like that's kind of
Let's
where we're heading.
go.
And it's like that to me is probably one of the greatest benefits. And that, as you say, you know, it's come from that peace of mind of no longer having to deal with this problem. Now you have all this space in your head to just focus on what you actually want instead of what
Yeah.
you previously were stuck trying to fight and resist and be in this battle of distraction. And it just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so much
I
better.
love it. So, when I was, introducing myself earlier, the one thing I didn't mention is that my original addiction was nicotine. When I learned this method 30 some years ago, it was for nicotine addiction. And now it's still so prevalent, and I tried everything, that I could to try not to think about my nicotine addiction, and I see so much right now, with vaping and stuff, and it's kind of misunderstood. And there's so many people doing vaping, and there's so much nicotine in that. And I just want to let people know that, I do have a very significant history with nicotine addiction because so many people are struggling thinking it's that same conflict. I'm either going to be miserable, trying to stop smoking or stop using nicotine, or I'm going to be miserable using it. They don't know that there's actually this methodology to get totally free of it and not even think about it, ultimately. But it's one of I mean, all the addictions are mistreated, but nicotine addiction is really mistreated because they're treating nicotine addiction with nicotine. They're giving people, they call it medication. Oh, you can call this number for free medication. And it's basically nicotine and a gum and a patch or whatever, so it's a very serious addiction. And, like I said, food compulsion has surpassed it, but it's still killing so many people on a regular basis, and that suffering, leading up to it. I mean, what could be worse than losing your life's breath. I mean, I've had people that get to like emphysema that say it's like trying to always breathe through a coffee straw. If you ever try to do that, what that feels like. And so there's a ton of hope. Help is here for nicotine addiction as well, because it's something I really think that people that are stuck in that addiction feel like that there's no hope, that it's either misery or misery, but that's not true. So we're here for that too. And that was my history. I didn't come into this as a food addict or a porn addict. It was it was nicotine addiction for me originally. So yeah, it's I have extremely high success rate, about 85% success rate with dealing with nicotine addiction. So yeah, help is
Yeah.
here for that too.
I think,
Mhm.
we've talked about porn, we've talked about food, we've talked about nicotine.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that we've experienced is a lot of our clients so far have had all three, or at least two of those, right? So it's
Yeah,
really
or more
common. Mm,
gaming, right? Screen time, social media is huge now. I mean, all the kids are just like totally addicted to social media. And then there's the other thing that's super popular right now is relationship addiction. Everybody, there's so many YouTubers and sites where you can go try to deal with, I'm stuck in this narcissistic relationship. And it's like it's a compulsion. If we look at compulsion, it's any behavior that you're doing that you can't stop doing, even though it's causing you a lot of harm. So I mean, I work gambling is a big one. I've worked with a lot of gamblers. So but it's again, it's like promoted in our society. But even though they're normalizing addiction, everywhere you look, the negative consequences of addiction aren't going to disappear just because it's normal. People are still suffering and they want to get free. So help is here, you know?
yeah. Well, Mary,
Yeah,
I've got two things I really want to say about that. So the
sure.
first thing is that if you are choosing to go beyond the compulsion, if you do want to like overcome this problem, there is going to be some withdrawal along the way. And that withdrawal is really, really important because by going through that, you're changing addicted neural pathways. And you do have to really go through some discomfort to get to the other end, I believe, because if you're not going through any discomfort at all, chances are you are just replacing the habit. Now, it's not that extreme withdrawal, it's not that difficult, but it is something to go through. And I was thinking about this earlier today because what I was thinking is, all right, let's say you are having an urge to engage and you can engage. That is an option, that is a choice. I think reframing it from, I've got to quit porn or I can't look at porn or, oh, this is so annoying. I really hate feeling like this desire, and it's just not going away. I just want to concentrate on the stuff I want to concentrate on. I just can't stop thinking sexual thoughts one way or another or, about porn on some level. It's like during those moments, instead of having all that angst and frustration and irritability, just reframe it as, okay, I'm feeling like this right now. And you know what? That is a choice. I could actually just go and look at porn right now. I could go and get out of this withdrawal. I don't actually have to go through this. And I think that's really, really important. And the other thing I wanted to say is I think if you're going through any addiction right now, what I'd recommend is actually maybe writing down or having it somewhere in your head at least, like your list of compulsions, because
Yeah.
chances are most people are going to replace one addiction with another. If you're not clear on all your addictions, you are just going to go round in circles and you are going to end up being the fat porn addict. And you definitely don't want that.
Yeah.
You want to go beyond this.
Well, the thing is when people don't have a method to deal with that desire, when they think that they're gonna, replace it with food or replace it with exercise or replace it with whatever, they don't have a tool to deal with it. They don't know what else to do, So, and you spoke of withdrawal, it's like, especially if you're in withdrawal and you don't have a powerful tool to know exactly what you're dealing with, that's of course you're going to try to reach for something else to get out of that, and of course there's a lot of teaching that comes into being able to get through that withdrawal, which we deal with. But it reminds me of the one of our clients. he wrote a testimonial that said, basically, I've been wandering around for 20 years in this addiction, wondering what is this? What am I doing? And he said, and now he's 100% clear and what he's dealing with, how to deal with it, and basically thanked us for, he said he owed us his life and freedom from porn, right? And I like too that he happened to say that the future of humanity needs us. That was pretty cool. Like, thank you. Yeah, but it's true, 20 years wandering around. Oh my God, I'm in this addiction. I don't know what to do. Now he knows exactly what to do. So that's what we provide, because you can, it was interesting. You put in one of your emails about what did you say? Running on the trying to outrun, running on the treadmill of helplessness or something, or distraction, and just
Yeah, the self-improvement treadmill. I was talking about that in my email today.
right. That's it.
Yeah, it's just because, like in the past, what I was doing is it would just be constantly trying to keep up with self-improvement habits, meditation, journaling, exercise, getting to sleep on time, eating healthy foods,
Yeah.
just all the sort of stuff that I'd been told to do for NoFap, and it just wasn't sustainable. And that's why I did do quite well on the NoFap streaks, but I always ended up looking at porn in the end, because one way or another, what would happen is I'd end up feeling a bit annoyed at myself because I'd been trying so hard to do all these self-improvement habits, and then eventually I wouldn't be able to keep up with them. And the addictive part of the mind would use that as an opportunity, and I'd have all this desire, all this self-deprecation, all these junky thoughts. And I think self-deprecation is one of the most common junky thoughts out there as well. Things
For
like,
sure.
oh, I'm an idiot, I'm a failure, I can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's all trying to get you into a state of helplessness so that you end up choosing to engage. So
So
that's,
you're like literally and figuratively running,
yeah,
running, running, running.
literally.
And what you're saying about the self-deprecation reminds me, and I think it's a really important point, is how many of the guys that have come to us and they're ready to watch our videos, take our class and everything, and then they're just like, I'm afraid. I'm afraid because I failed so many times. And just to encourage anybody dealing with any kind of addiction, that because you failed so many times, don't be afraid to do this method, because it's not your failure. That's going to feed like you say, the self-deprecation junky thinking, right? It's not your failure. It's the methodologies that are being applied to addiction that are failing. So don't be afraid. Help is here. I keep saying it, right?
True.
Don't be
Yeah,
afraid. Help
yeah.
is here.
Mary, I was just looking actually to find that testimonial that you were talking about.
Yeah.
The
The
words
wonderful
were,
testimonial, that and many
yeah.
others. Yeah.
Well, he said, I went from wandering around for 20 years in this addiction to knowing exactly why it's happening and what to do about it. It turns out the solution is simple. That doesn't mean it's easy. It takes some repetition and willingness to accept some temporary discomfort. It's 100% worth it. I owe my life and freedom to this program. Thank you. So,
Yes.
I
Love
don't
it.
want this podcast to just be like some sales spiel to get people into our
Yeah.
program. It's there as an option, but I think the main thing to get across is just that, look, if you struggled with porn up to this date, there's literally nothing wrong with you. All that's happened is you've not been taught yet a methodology, and you've not been given a practical tool where you think through urges correctly, deal with the compulsive desire, and then get through it to disconnect addictive neural pathways and get permanent mental freedom. And there's so much
Yeah.
information out there teaching helplessness
Yeah.
that if you've not been taught this, I just, there's no wonder why I struggled for so long. There's no wonder why so many of our clients struggled for so long. Most people who come to us, it's at least 10 years before they've, even heard of like addictive neural pathways, because they've been taught so much BS, or maybe they just listen to your brain on porn and think that's going to be useful.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, what were you going to say, Mary?
Well, as far as like selling the program, as part of this podcast, that was never like our intent. I mean, but I feel like the passion comes from selling hope. There's hope. There's hope for permanent mental freedom. The addiction is not a life sentence. It's not something you have to go to, like Matthew Perry, 6,000 meetings and, 9 rehab, all of it, not spending $9 million and still dying from addiction. It's just like we're selling hope, and getting that message out might sound like sales because I think we're both very passionate to share that there is hope to really get free of it and be able to go on with your life in a way that you don't have this constant conflict and this monkey on your back of this problem or going from one addiction to another. And yeah, so we are selling hope. It's true. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think as
That's
the
the
episodes
passion.
go on, there will be a lot of episodes which are going to be really, really useful. So
Yeah.
basically, we've got episodes planned mostly around counteracting helplessness, counteracting junky thoughts. I'm going to be doing loads on my own, just going down to the studio and talking about junky thoughts that I've had in the past and thoughts that clients have had. And I really do hope they are going to be able to help people. And I think Mary's right about that hope, because I think for me anyway, I'd actually got to a point where I'd accepted the reality of that addiction. I'd kind of just come to terms with, what, like engaging every few months isn't too bad. And I didn't, and I guess I kind of avoided the reality of the addiction. I kind of accepted engaging every few months and avoided the reality that I was in the addiction. And that wasn't actually that good a place to be. It wasn't the worst place to be. It just wasn't a good place to be. And I didn't have the actual benefits that you gained from learning how to take control of your mind and deal with compulsive desire. And I think that's
Well,
the
and the thing is too, you can think, oh, I'm controlling this once a month is okay or whatever. But that tends to just spiral out of control again too. And you end up back where you were, And the thing is too, you're intermittently reinforcing. And I don't know. I just feel like to try to control an addiction, that can be a full-time job. Who wants that? When you have the possibility to just not have that desire anymore. What do you want? It's like settling for a low standard. Okay, I'm just once a month. Okay, I guess I'm okay with that. It's like, no, fat suit's still in the closet.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
my
exactly.
thought. I mean, the thing is you didn't give up. You weren't okay with it. You kept looking for a permanent solution. So
Well, I wouldn't
it's
have had those
really
coaching sessions if, I had it all completely sus, would I? So kind of felt
yeah.
like I needed them, even if I thought I was doing quite well. I kind of knew that, hmm, maybe things could be even better. And I guess that's kind of partly why I started having podcast guests on. And I had to listen to a lot of rubbish before I
Yeah.
met you as well. Because, I had other podcast guests where I
Yeah.
listened back to those episodes and I was just like, I don't really think that's going to actually help that much, because it's not changed the underlying thought patterns. If you're thinking in a certain way, your actions are going to be in a certain way as well. When you change those thoughts, you change how you feel. When you change how you feel, you change how you act. So if you've
Yeah.
got people talking about certain things and having certain thought patterns, and then you're listening to them and thinking that's right, it's like the inevitable is going to happen. You're going to continue engaging, even if engaging doesn't feel as bad to you anymore, because maybe you've learned how to deal with shame and you've maybe detached from the identity of a porn addict as such. It's like if you're still engaging, that's still a problem. I think you want to get to a
Yeah.
position where you are 100% in control of yourself, all urges, and you have the absolute integrity to be able to talk about porn and your relationship with porn to literally anyone in your life. When you get to that position, in my opinion, that's when you're free. So,
Well,
yeah.
that makes me think about, you say, dealing with, you learn to deal with shame. So consequences of addiction can kind of like, change, and, maybe some are less and some are more, whatever. But, now, just briefly, the main things that people apply are like therapy. Deal with all your shame, deal with all your emotional issues, deal with your trauma, right? So deal with your stress. All of these things, right, are the main focuses on helping people that have an addiction. Is like, go to therapy, right? Well, that's great. Go to therapy, deal with trauma, whatever you're having, you need that support. Good, go do that. But dealing with old trauma, dealing with stress is not going to change the neural pathway of compulsive or addictive desire. That needs to be dealt with very specifically. And that's what we do. And we're not offering up a method that's like, oh, well, kind of, how do I use this? What do I do? Kind of like to your own, open to your own interpretation, where it's kind of like all open-ended. No, it's like, bam, we get you right there. This is exactly what you're going to do. Deal with that moment of compulsive desire, change that pathway to get free, yeah. But if you have trauma, do get emotional support. That's great for that. But yeah, and stress management, people I've worked with for 35 years, the number one stress in their life is they're stuck in an addiction that they can't get mentally free of.
Yeah,
Not
absolutely.
they're not doing it because they're stressed. They're stressed because they're doing it.
I
So
know, I
it's a
know.
gigantic misconception. So yeah,
Yeah, I spoke to a guy this week actually who, again, he was interested in the program, but he'd actually listened to some of the episodes early on. And that was one of the reasons, again, I was like, I really need to delete these episodes because it's just
yeah,
doing people a massive disservice. And
yeah,
he
yeah,
was talking
sure.
about in that, he was talking about how he's gone through all this stress in his life. Obviously, I'm not going to say what, but he's struggling with a few things that happened externally. And he was saying that's the reason that he's been looking at porn a lot more over the last year. And
Yeah,
it's it's difficult for me to hear that and not just want to
yeah,
kind of give him all this information on actually the addictive part of the mind looks for reasons. The addictive part of the mind is going to say it's stress because if it's stress, you can continue engaging indefinitely. Nothing's ever going to change because there's always
yeah,
going to be difficult obstacles and challenges going on externally in your life. That is how life is. I've
yeah.
actually got some stuff going on in my life right now, which, if I'm truly honest, I very, very rarely even think about anymore. And again, with the self-deprecation as well, you just have like lack of confidence, feelings of anxiety, shame about who I was. There's all these sort of different thoughts and feelings I used to have in the past, and I just don't have any of those things anymore. And I really, really believe it's because I've overcome this addiction, and actually all of those like thoughts and worries and anxieties and stresses in my life, they were reasons from like the addictive part of the mind trying to get me to engage because the addictive part of the mind will do whatever it can to try to get you to engage. And when you understand that, you can go, okay, I'm stressed out right now. Why am I stressed out? And half the time it's just going to be because you're in an addiction. Maybe the other half
Yeah.
is there's this external stuff going on, but you can deal with
Totally misunderstood. It's not about stress, but that's like everything you're going to hear out there. Almost every addiction treatment is going to teach you stress management techniques.
it. Mm,
It's like we're going to teach you deal with your compulsive desire techniques.
yeah.
And then if you have some stress in your life, then use some of these techniques they're pushing for addiction. Then do some deep breathing or meditation. But all that stuff has nothing to do with addiction. It's like then you use stress management techniques for that if you have stress, but not if you have addiction, you know,
Mm,
big
mm.
difference. So yeah. So I think we're probably getting close to winding up, aren't we?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wind it up here. So hopefully you've enjoyed the first episode of the Help Is Here podcast. And if you would like to learn more about the Beyond Compulsion method, go to beyondcompulsionacademy.com where you can find some free training. Thanks so much for joining me, Mary. I'm looking forward to doing
Yes.
a lot more episodes together over the
Me
next few
too.
months. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.
Bye bye.